Somebody asked what you think about Tulsi Gabbard's foreign policy positions.
I like it. The foreign policy, which is the primary foreign policy, is to oppose regime change. And I think regime change is ridiculous. She's also opposed she wants to close military bases. We have 800 military bases around the world. It's pathetic. Here we go. Compare us to China. China has got the Belt and Road, and what they want to do is to be able to raise economically the people of the world by improving roads, improving communications, improving ports, all of that. And so, what are we doing? We're the ones that sell most weapons in the arms bazaar of the world. If you want to make a comparison with Russia and China and the United States, you have to have an overview, because we get so much bias and of course the mainstream media is controlled by Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. So we've been dumbed down into thinking. But if you want to look at the situation with China, Russia, and the United States, you look at their military budgets. That's what you do. What are they spending their money on? Well, Russia is less than 10% of the American budget. China is pushing 15% of the American budget. So where are they a threat to us in any real sense? They're not. If they were a threat, they'd be arming themselves to the teeth and they'd be spending more money. Oh, sure. They both got, you know how many nukes China has? Intelligence tells us that they have 200 nukes. How many do we have? 7,000. You begin to look at this and you double take it. And what the hell's going on? What are they writing about? And then what disturbs me is there are two things that are going to destroy the planet. Is nuclear. And of course, what did Obama do? He started the refurbishment of the nuclear establishment, spending $1.7 trillion to beef up the nuclear capability. And of course, that means that we're going to spend more on submarines, more on airplanes, more on all of this stuff. And it's not 1.7 trillion. If you know the record of the Pentagon, where they have cost overruns that are 100, 200%, well, what we're talking about is maybe $3-4 trillion that we're spending on a weapon that's not usable. Why do I say it's not usable? If anybody used a weapon, it would create a nuclear winter, and so we would destroy the planet. And so when people say we've got to have our retaliatory capability, don't worry about retaliating, you'll be dead. So why spend the money on retaliating? And what, China's with their 200 weapons are going to go out? Then you hear about the South China Seas. China has got one aircraft carrier and they're building another one. We got 11. Yeah. Okay, so who's really out there in the South China Sea? Well, what happened? The Chinese are very clever. They dug the soil near the islands and made these islands larger, where they can put airfields on. So what the number of islands, I forget but probably they have maybe 10 or 5 or 10 with these islands, and what they are, they're unsinkable aircraft carriers. That's what they are. Yeah. They got an airfield, and they're unsinkable because the Chinese are only interested in the well-being of the South China Sea, because that is their livelihood. The shipping lanes that the South China Sea. And so what we would do is, if we were at war, and they know this strategically, that the Straits of Malacca would be cut off to the Chinese. Singapore is an ally of the United States, so that would be a problem. So the Chinese don't want any war. What they want to do is make products and use their industry to bring the people up economically in the world, the way they did. And this is an awesome statistic. China, in 3 decades, has raised 500 million people from poverty to middle class. Probably they have maybe 10 or 5 or 10 with these islands, and what they are, they're unsinkable aircraft carriers. That's what they are. Yeah. They got an airfield, and they're unsinkable because the Chinese are only interested in the well-being of the South China Sea, because that is their livelihood. They're shipping lanes that the South China Sea. And so what we would do is, if we were at war, and they know this strategically, that the Straits of Malacca would be cut off to the Chinese. Singapore is an ally of the United States, so that would be a problem. So the Chinese don't want any war. What they want to do is make products and use their industry to bring the people up economically in the world, the way they did. And this is an awesome statistic. China, in 3 decades, has raised 500 million people from poverty to middle class. Now, there's never been an experience like that anywhere else in civilization. And so you begin to wonder, are they such bad? They're interested in enriching the quality of life of their people. What's wrong with that? If it's an autocratic system, I got to tell you, you don't want me to describe the autocratic nature of the American system. So no, we can put that away. But I hearken back to, if you want to know what's going on, take an overview, because the mainstream they're lying to you. What we need is a bias. What we need to do is to be able to look at the overview. And again, who's spending the money on weapons and who's spending the money on economic development. That's what tells the story.
Thank you. Another question was, what are your thoughts on the protests in Hong Kong?
It's a mixed bag. One, I'm for it, and another reason I'm against it. The reason why I'm for it is because it advances in some way democracy. Now, democracy is very imperfect in the world, and that's the reason why I'm against it in many respects, because you assume that the right to vote is democracy. That's not democracy, because the right to vote now is oppressed in the United States, and it would be oppressed over there even if they had a democracy. The democracies don't work in the world today. What you can vote, well, so what? You vote. Why is it that the tyrants get back in office so easily when people have the right to vote? So selling democracy that you're going to have the right to vote. No, I come at it from a very personal way. I believe that the people should have the right to make laws in partnership with the monopoly held by representative government. Because the people are not stupid. They can sense what's going on. And so whenever I see a protest, like the one I see in Hong Kong or in the United States, it's just an admission that democracy doesn't work. Or the type of democracy doesn't work because people have to protest. The only time it works is for the second when you go into a polling booth and you throw a switch. Right when you do that, you got power. After you've done that, then you got to beg, borrow, and whatever, suck up to the people that got elected, and you don't get another chance to exercise your power for 2, 4, 6 years. That's my take on it. So I'm glad in a sense they're protesting, because, but if they go to extremes, then all of that will cause oppression, and that's not the solution. If you're going to protest, and then just be very, very careful how you do it. But Xi Jinping doesn't want to send troops into Hong Kong, but they're trying to box him in. It's a little bit Tiananmen Square. Most Americans think that thousands of people were killed in Tiananmen Square. The record indicates, by objective analysis, several hundred. And Tiananmen Square, most people, this were students. And I remember so vividly when the premier came down to talk to the students and offer them compromises. Oh, God, there's my dog.
Little Ginger.
Ginger. Well, what happened in Tiananmen Square, most people forget that 10 years before that, you had the Cultural Revolution where several million people were killed. And they were trying to bring back China to the Stone Age by taking university professors and making them work on farms. So now you take Chen Xiaoping, who was abused, physically abused, and a relative killed in the Cultural Revolution. And now he's the head of China, and you got these kids that are protesting, and this one scene that I recall so well, when the premier was caving into a bunch of issues, and this sophomoric young man said, "That's not enough. They want to run the country." Well, the adult Chinese at that time had an experience of the sophomores running the country, and that was the Cultural Revolution. Mm-hmm. And so the leadership, anybody in leadership knows that if you got to take recourse to violence, fine. If you're in an apartheid country and you use violence, I can understand that. But if you're in a place like Hong Kong, where it's culturally and economically superior to most places on earth, then you got to be careful how you're handling yourself. And there's no question that that law that they were proposing to be able to take people back to China for prosecution, I agree that law should be. And so once that protest was done and succeeded, now what are the protests doing now? I have a hard time understanding how they want to separate totally from China when China is on a rise. And eventually, China will have to reconcile itself to a more democratic form of government. What will it be? I don't know. I do know that when we get to a point that when the people are making laws, this will go around the world like wildfire. Mm. And so I've got a book coming out. I hope you buy it. Yeah. And the book is The Failure of Representative Government. And so that's all we have. In the world, we have the tyrants and we have representative government. And the representative government is not working well. Mm-hmm. That's the only take I have. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't really work hard to elect good people to public office, because we've got so many people in office that are just empty shirts.
Yeah.